We had a cold snap in Arkansas this week. It's going to be our coldest week so far this year. How do I know it's cold? Well, three things. Number one, there was the weather forecast. They told us that this is going to be a very cold week, and it is. Number two, I know it's cold because I went out to feed my chickens this morning and the water was frozen in their water bowl. Number three, how I know it's cold, I walked back from my chicken house and I was wearing a pair of flip-flops because that's what I've been used to wearing, and my feet were frozen. Three things telling me it's cold, and it's cold this week. So I don't know about you, but we're in Matthew chapter 2, and we're going to talk about the birth of Christ. Every time I think of Matthew chapter 2 and the birth of Christ, I think of something cold. Mary and Joseph in a stable with a little baby born in a manger, and it's cold. They're trying to find blankets or something to keep the Messiah warm. Three things you're going to see in Matthew chapter 2 that's telling you something different about this whole scene. All right, number one, it's in the very first verse. Chapter 2, verse 1, it says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem." All right, so we have Magi coming. Here's the first thing that we see. There is a promise. So in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, there is a promise. The Magi come because they heard about a Messiah that was going to be born. They follow a star and they find the baby Jesus lying in a cold manger. That's the first thing. So you see the Magi. Number two, the first one was the promise. Number two is there's paranoia in chapter 2, and that's Herod. Look at what Herod does in verse 3. Verse 3, chapter 2, verse 3, "When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him." You know what King Herod started to do? Because he's paranoid? He started thinking everybody was lying to him. He calls the Magi in. He thinks the Magi are lying to him. He starts killing babies. He kills so many babies, in fact, that Mary and Joseph have to run out of the nation of Israel all the way to Egypt just to protect the newborn Messiah. So there was a promise, there was paranoia, and the third thing that you see real clearly is that there's a plan. So in chapter 2, verse 13, it says, "Now when they had gone, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, 'Get up, take the child.'" You want to know why they had to flee? Because there's a real cool contrast here in chapter 2. It says that Jesus was born the Messiah. Herod was paranoid, and they had to flee because Herod wasn't born the king. Jesus was born the king of Israel, and they had to flee. The angels saw it and warned Mary and Joseph. You see, that's the plan. So there's something really cool. Leaving chapter 2 of Matthew, if you went to 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 12, this is a verse that I always think about around Christmas time. In chapter 1 of 1 Peter, it talks about the prophets. And the prophets saw something. What the prophets talked about was that the angels looked into this little manger crib, and the angels said, "You know what? There's a plan for humans, but there's no plan for angels." It says in 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 12, "Things into which angels long to look." See, there was no plan for salvation for angels. If an angel sinned, he was a demon, and that was forever. There was no plan of salvation. But for the created world of humans, the angels look into the manger, and they see that there's a plan for humans. The Messiah was born in a cold winter day in a manger. Mary and Joseph had to flee. There was a promise, there was paranoia, and there was a plan. You see, that's the plan that we see on Christmas Day, a plan that people can be saved from their sins. That's why we celebrate Christmas. I hope you have a warm, wonderful Christmas.